What happens when you take one of DC's most complex anti-heroes and strip away everything that made him compelling in the first place? You get Peacemaker Season 2, a train wreck, so catastrophic it makes you long for the days when DC's biggest problem was just bad CGI mustaches, to co-mixing, where we dive deep into the world of comics and their adaptations. And today, we need to have a serious conversation about what might be the most disappointing superhero television disaster in recent memory. Peacemaker Season 2 has arrived, and unfortunately, it's brought nothing but shame to the DC brand and disrespect to decades of comic book storytelling. When James Gunn's Peacemaker debuted in 2022, it felt like lightning in a bottle. Despite its crude humor and ultra-violent tendencies, the first season managed to find genuine heart within Christopher Smith's damaged psyche. It was rough around the edges, but it had soul. The character work was compelling, was kinetic, and most importantly, it felt like it understood the source material's core themes about redemption and the cost of violence. Season 2 throws all of that straight into the garbage disposal, where the first season found clever ways to balance Peacemaker's inherent contradictions, his desire for peace through violent means. This sophomore effort completely abandons any pretense of character development or thematic coherence. Instead, we're subjected to 8 episodes of mindless gore, juvenile toilet humor, and plot threads so convoluted they make the later seasons of Lost look like masterpieces of narrative clarity. The most egregious sin of Peacemaker Season 2 is how it completely destroys everything that made Christopher Smith interesting in the first place. Gone is the tortured soul wrestling with his father's legacy and his own moral compass. In its place, we get a caricature, a one-dimensional psychopath who seems to exist solely to spout one-liners. Between increasingly elaborate kill sequences, John Cena, who brought surprising nuance to the role in Season 1, seems to have checked out entirely. His performance lacks any of the vulnerability that made his previous portrayal compelling. Instead, he delivers every line with the same smirking detachment, as if he's reading cue cards between takes. The emotional beats that should land with devastating impact, particularly in episodes dealing with his trauma, fall completely flat because there's no genuine feeling behind them. But the character assassination doesn't stop with Peacemaker himself. Every supporting character from the first season has been fundamentally altered in ways that betray their established personalities. Leota Adebayo, who once served as the team's moral center, has been transformed into a generic action hero, spouting exposition between gunfights. Vigilante's endearing psychopathy has been amplified to cartoonish levels that remove any trace of the character's underlying humanity. Even Eagly, the beloved pet eagle, now feels like a marketing gimmick rather than a genuine part of the story. If the character work is disappointing, the plotting is downright insulting. Season 2's central narrative revolves around yet another alien invasion threat, but this time, the stakes feel manufactured and hollow. The show introduces multiple new antagonist factions without properly developing any of them. The result is a confusing mess, where viewers struggle to understand who's fighting whom and why we should even care. The season's obsession with interconnected conspiracies and government cover-ups feels like a poor imitation of better shows. Every episode introduces new layers of corruption and double crosses, but none of it feels organic to the world or characters. Instead, it comes across as the writers throwing concepts at the wall to see what sticks, resulting in a narrative that's simultaneously overstuffed and undernourished. Perhaps most frustratingly, the show repeatedly sets up intriguing plot threads only to abandon them entirely. A subplot involving Peacemaker's psychological evaluation promises to explore his mental state in meaningful ways, but it's dropped after 2 episodes in favor of more explosion sequences. A potential romance storyline that could have provided emotional grounding gets resolved off-screen between episodes. These aren't creative choices. They're signs of a production that doesn't know what story it wants to tell. One of the most disturbing aspects of Peacemaker Season 2 is its relationship with violence. While the first season certainly didn't shy away from brutal imagery, the violence served the story and characters. It was a reflection of Christopher Smith's fractured worldview and the consequences of his choices. Season 2 treats violence as entertainment, pure and simple. The kill sequences have become increasingly elaborate and sadistic, clearly designed to generate social media clips rather than serve any narrative purpose. Characters die in grotesque ways for no reason other than shock value. The show seems to mistake cruelty for cleverness, brutality for sophistication. It's the kind of adolescent approach to violence that gives superhero media a bad reputation. Even worse, the series has completely lost sight of the moral implications of its protagonists' actions. Peacemaker kills dozens of people throughout the season, but there's never any real consequence or reflection on these deaths. They're treated as punchlines rather than tragedies, which fundamentally undermines everything the character is supposed to represent. As comic book fans, we've seen our favorite characters adapted countless times across various media. Sometimes these adaptations enhance and expand on the source material in meaningful ways. Other times, they miss the mark but still show respect for the character's core essence. Peacemaker. Season 2 represents a third, more troubling category: adaptations that actively harm the source material's reputation. The Christopher Smith of the comics, created by Joe Gill and Pat Boyette, was never meant to be a simple joke character. Even in his most absurd storylines, there was always an underlying tragedy to his quest for peace through violence. The character has been explored by talented writers like John Ostrander and Gail Simone, who found genuine pathos in his contradictions. This season completely ignores that rich history in favor of surface-level references and Easter eggs that feel more like mockery than homage. When the show does reference classic Peacemaker storylines, it's only to subvert them in ways that feel cheap and cynical rather than clever or meaningful. Even setting aside the writing and character issues, Peacemaker Season 2 fails on a technical level. The action sequences, which should be the show's bread and butter, are poorly choreographed and shot with the kind of shaky cam aesthetic that went out of style a decade ago. The special effects look rushed and unconvincing, particularly in scenes involving Eagly and the various alien threats. The show's production design, which was a highlight of the first season, feels lazy and uninspired. The various locations blend together into a generic superhero show aesthetic that could belong to any number of similar productions. Even the costume design seems less thoughtful, with new character outfits looking more like Halloween costumes than practical superhero gear. Perhaps the most concerning aspect of Peacemaker Season 2's failure is what it represents for DC's future in television and film. James Gunn, who serves as co-CEO of DC Studios, has positioned this series as a cornerstone of his new DC universe. If this is the level of quality and storytelling sophistication we can expect from that endeavor, DC fans have every reason to be worried. The series sets a troubling precedent that suggests DC is more interested in generating controversy and social media buzz than in telling meaningful stories about their characters. It prioritizes shock value over substance, crude humor over genuine wit, and spectacle over character development. These are not the building blocks of a sustainable cinematic universe. What makes Peacemaker Season 2 so particularly frustrating is that it had all the ingredients for success. The first season proved that these characters could work in live action. John Cena showed he could handle the dramatic demands of the role. The supporting cast was strong, and the world building was solid. All the pieces were in place for something special. Instead, we got a season that feels like it was focus grouped to death, stripped of everything that made its predecessor interesting in favor of broad comedy and meaningless action. It's a textbook example of how to take a promising concept and run it straight into the ground through poor creative choices and a fundamental misunderstanding of what made it work in the first place. The most tragic aspect is that this season's failures will likely overshadow the genuine achievements of its predecessor. New viewers discovering the series will judge it based on this disappointing sophomore effort, never getting the chance to experience what made the first season compelling. In the end, Peacemaker Season 2 stands as a monument to wasted potential and creative bankruptcy. It's a series that mistakes loudness for depth, cruelty for cleverness, and spectacle for substance. For DC fans who have waited decades to see their favorite characters treated with respect and sophistication on screen, this season represents everything wrong with modern superhero entertainment. It's not just a bad television show. It's an active disservice to the rich legacy of DC Comics and the countless creators who have contributed to these characters over the decades. James Gunn and his team had the opportunity to build something meaningful and lasting. Instead, they've delivered a product that feels designed to be forgotten as quickly as possible. That might be the kindest fate this season could hope for. This has been Co-Mixing. And remember, Just because something wears a superhero costume doesn't mean it deserves your time or respect. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and keep demanding better from the stories that shape our culture.